Hey, welcome to our Humpday Hangout today, Fire Engineering's Humpday Hangout. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, and we've got a great show lined up for you today. As always, I'm with my co-host, Chief Terry McGrath from the Lewisville, Texas Fire Department. We had one of our guests just had some technical problems. Fire Marshal Tim Ippolito from Lewisville may join us later, but probably not. He's had some hiccups with the computers, but we've got a couple great guests with us today. We've got Fire Marshal John Gillette from Frisco, Texas. Unless you've been sleeping under a rock, anything that's going on in North Texas is going on in Frisco. Don't let any of the towns around you kid you. They are building, booming, just taking it and running with it. It's amazing everything that's going on there, and we'll get to John in a second about all that. And then and a very, very good friend of mine, Jack Murphy. Jack, and I don't want to, I said it before, I don't want to embarrass him, but again, if you're into this job at all, you know Jack is one of the most highly regarded fire protection consultants in the world, not just in the United States of America, in the world. And it's great to have you guys here. Thanks, fellas.
Thank you.
Hey, one more quick note, folks. If you have a question, we're going to do our best we can to get to them. Fire it off on Twitter, and just make sure you add hashtag FE Talk, FE for Fire Engineering Talk, and we'll get to everything we can and go from there. But anyway, that being said, I'm live down at the Trophy Club Firehouse here, doing some great things. We're all in different places. I've got a great group here, as I always brag about them. Great fire department. We're hiring, as everybody else is in the Metroplex here. But John, I'll just throw it to you right away, because we're talking. Our title today for our topic was pushing fire prevention to front lines. First of all, let me just throw this out there, and I know Jack sees this in his travels, but how are you keeping up with everything in Frisco? I mean, my God, dude, you're building everything there.
Yeah, we have a great staff that works hard at keeping up with it, but I think the big part of it is it's a team collaboration to be successful. You have to have the collaboration of building inspections. You have to have good police that help you. Obviously, the firefighters being frontline. The fire marshal's office is a key player in it. And you got to have these relationships and coalitions that you can work through challenges when you find out about it. Your frontline firefighters should know their districts. And when they know their districts, they're familiar with things that change. So how we're keeping up with growth is we're averaging between 120 to 150 fire code permits a month out of the fire marshal's office. A lot of this is, hey, we get the big projects like the Dallas Cowboys world headquarters is here, and the city's partnership with the Star. The FC Dallas soccer team has been here for a while. The Rough Riders, they've all had development and growth. So what we have to do is we get involved in the project from the time it's talked about all the way till the project's constructed. And then after the projects are constructed, we're out there in the field. The firefighters are knowing their districts and getting to the field. So when they run into a problem, then these people that are in these buildings that you don't have enough staff to find the problems, you get a call from an operations person that says, hey, we've been out here and this business was supposedly vacant, but now somebody's running something illegal in it. Those are the relationships you need to be able to catch these things as the days and weeks progress, because of all the construction growth that you have day in, day out. And it's not uncommon for, be 8-10 messages when I go to a meeting and come back with all people wanting to build and grow. So when you get high profile type facilities and you get all the hotels and all the other things that come around it, then, oh, by the way, you get the other economic development growth in your city. It's where you have to keep up to survive, to do good fire prevention in your community.
Well, I want to ask Jack this, and I know Terry's going to jump in there as well. You mentioned several times already the importance, you said it, you could tell your voice, the crews knowing their districts, knowing what's going on. Jack, you've been doing this a long time and have made tremendous headway. First of all, your background covers everything, not just the fire prevention, but your expertise of fire protection. How important, from your end, if we just hit on that right away, getting the guys to realize, to know their district, to know what's going on, you know what I'm saying, to be more proactive instead of this. How do we do that?
All right. If you're dealing with the career departments and the companies go out and everything, I challenge them to go into the buildings and gather recon information. We talk about pre-planning. And everybody mentions it. Every book I read, strategy book, it has it, but it's a paragraph or two. These buildings, as they know down by you, they're changing rapidly. They're hybrids now. I can no longer feel comfortable outside. It's a 1 or a 5. And where does that hybrid cut off? Where's the fire resistant one in the pedestal buildings? Then you put the lumber yard on top. And that aspect, how do you know where they are in the building too? So the idea is that get your companies together and just like the military, we're going to go out and do recon on these buildings. Take it from the ground up. When the foundation goes in, start looking there. Even if you're doing existing buildings, you find little nuances. I was just in the tallest building in New York, 1,400 feet, an apartment building. We went in there and we're looking at the footprint of the corridors, 40 feet. It's an 85 by 85 foot building, 40 feet. And I'm going, okay, I have an ops floor. Where am I putting these people? You put them in the corridor. I have no place for them. So I have to make multiple floors. The other thing too is, look, I went into the stairwell and I was with the battalion chief. I said, Tom, go to 18. I'm gonna go back down to 17. So when you go from one floor to the other, you usually have one turn. There were 6 to get to the 18th floor because the footprint is smaller. So the stair rises are not that much in length. So those are the things you capture when you get into the buildings. Now, where do you put that stuff? Well, some people put it on cards and things like that. I say the fire department has to leave a legacy. So when the next crew comes in, they don't have that challenge anymore. It's already written down, and that's done through electronically. My father spent 36 years as a career captain. When he left, he didn't tell me anything. He went out the door with all his knowledge. So we're trying to say that it's recon becomes intelligence. And then when the intelligence comes out, that's where you have all this stuff up front and how to take it apart.
Well, and Terry, and hey, Bobby, Chief Halton joined us. Hey, brother Bobby. I don't know if you're dialed in yet. But Terry, well, Bobby's getting dialed in. And Jack just mentioned that, the whole recon thing, and it is just a paragraph. It's a blip. John knows exactly what we're talking about, getting guys dialed in and appreciating that whole end of it. We talk hi, Bobby. We talk tactics and strategy. We talk like it's the military. Let's treat the fire ground like they do the battleground, all that stuff. But Jack, you pointed out something that one of my mentors pointed out to me, a tremendous fire ground officer, Jack McCaslin, a Vietnam vet, combat decorated Marine. One of my heroes is the one that taught me what it was and about, he goes, everybody wants to talk about the military and how close we are, but yet the military studies their enemy. Mm-hmm. They study their enemy, and us, and I think Frank used to say as well, Brannigan, the enemy is the building, the ammunition is the fire. Yeah. If we don't know our enemy, if we don't take time, then it's just like a guess. And like you said, recon in the building, and I told guys, it's like carbon monoxide alarms. Well, they're a pain in the ass. Well, yeah, but when you're in somebody's house, be looking, going, if I had to stretch right now, if I had to stretch initial attack line, guys, come here, look at this, look at that, look at this. It's an opportunity to be better at what we do. Forget even the whole, what we're trying to do ahead of time, preventing things. Getting in there and recon in the buildings, first of all, having the right attitude. Terry, you see it by you often. You've got a great group of guys there, but just like here, you got to remind them of the importance of getting out and being in the buildings, right?
Well, something that John led off with, and it was my top bullet point on my notes, and that is the prevention aspect of this job is everyone's job. We tend to use prevention, and with that, we associate that prevention's done by this group of people. And that's not true, and it shouldn't be true in any organization in this country, or probably worldwide, I could probably safely say. So, John mentioned that, and I think one of the areas that we see, and when I think of Frisco, and every time, and I drive through that city often, and I'm amazed at the amount of change from week to week. And I think to myself, how do you keep up with that? But the other challenge, and I guess, John, a question for you, is that during the build process, everything is hot and heavy and it's fresh, and crews are in there. The inspection guys are in there. The code inspectors across the city are in there. Then we have fire crews, first due crews come by. Maybe we do a tour, and everything's done on a kind of a this is the place kind of scale. But 5 years later, when it changes, or it's a new occupancy, or maybe it's not as new and fresh and exciting, but getting people to continue to go through there. And the idea for this show kind of came back in December on the heels of that tragedy in Oakland. And then as you read the horror stories, that an occupancy changed and morphed, as they all do. But was everyone keeping up with it? And I don't just mean fire inspections, but the first due crews and, so that sort of thing. And how can you address that? Let's say in Frisco, where you guys are absolutely covered up just with what's new.
Well, there's a couple ways we deal with that. One way we deal with that is the crews do go out and do safety checks when they're updating their pre-plans, and they send information to us that there's a change. It goes back to that building coalitions to work through challenges. So that's one way we do it. The other way we do it is when they make application for a change of business within a 24-hour period, we're in those. But that's just like anything else. They've got to still make that step to go in there. Some of the challenges that you'll run into as the cities age, because I would say from a previous municipality I worked at that was an older municipality, as time progresses in the 5, 10, 15 years down the road, you get changes in buildings. And the key is, how do you get that information to know quick enough to be able to get the code things done that need to be changed in that building? So when for example, our officers will go in and do a safety check. If they see a problem, then it's forwarded to the fire marshal's office, and we send an inspector out accordingly. From a city perspective, that's one way we deal with it. But then again, if we get a fire in a restaurant, I have the ability to work with health and make a phone call on a weekend and get something addressed that way. And you have to work in harmony with your city as a team to be successful at it. Because you cannot be successful at it. From all the municipalities I've worked at, you cannot be a one-leg show and be successful at it. And the other part that you have to do is take advantage of technology. And we have a technology that was set up for our safer programs that gives us the ability to have a lot of information on a computer that was created internally in joint coalition with the Frisco Independent School District. So one thing I've noticed in the industry on new construction is, as cheap as a digital picture is, I'm really surprised we don't see more companies out. I'm not talking about Frisco, I'm talking about statewide and nationally. You have the ability to go take photos of these buildings that are type 5s that have multiple construction facets, metal and wood mixed in, and we don't have a picture 10 years down the road that, hey, the building still looks the same. Why don't we take advantage of those technology things? So there's still ways to improve, but if you don't identify where your problems are, you'll have a very difficult time keeping up with the growth. And I think from a coalition perspective of the fire department and other city departments, we work hard to stay on track with that.
Well, and and we, like I said, Chief Halton joined us, the boss here. Bobby's got well over 40 years of experience in the fire service, and I'm probably shortening that a little bit. But Bobby, you're all over the place, and Jack started off before you got on about talking about the importance of reconning, getting out and seeing these things, and gave some great examples. John, we talked about Frisco. They're booming, very proactive city, great fire department. We've got some great folks here in Trophy Club, smaller, but the guys do their jobs. And we talk about Lewisville. You're out there, you're all over the world. I mean, you're Saudi Arabia, different places like Jack. But Bobby, what the challenge, again, to get the guys to really wrap their arms around the fact that fire prevention, codes, we've talked about our history classes, the I Chiefs were formed. Their first goal was to create an international building code that people could wrap their arms around. That was a long time ago. Well, what do we have to do, Bobby?
Their first mission was to standardize hose coupling thread. That was their first goal. Well done.
Well done. But Bobby, just in your observations and travels and everything else with the magazines, and I said plural magazines, and the challenge, how do we get this pushed again to where guys are like, instead of this, we got to go out and do an inspection, we got to go do a pre-plan, to realize that they're protecting lives, and this is huge. This is where it all starts. Otherwise, we're just guessing. What do we do to change that attitude or to work on it or whatever?
Well, I think that there's multifaceted issues in the question. So for me, I think that you look at the mission of the group that you're talking about. People make a lot of correlations to the military, and God bless people for doing that. But you have to remember that they're pretty clear about war fighting's first, operate forward second, being ready third. I mean, they have a progression in a hierarchy of disciplines, if you will, and that comes from having perception, action, and will very well ingrained into their psyches. So what that means for us in the fire service, if you want to take the best of that thought process to what we're doing, is if you really want to get folks excited, and Jack and you and I have done this in a lot of places, is tie it into what and the chief has in Frisco. You tie it into what the men and women's primary mission is. So for your firefighters, firefighting first, tie them into the pre-fire planning, the action plan, if you will. Make the issue and the goals of the awareness and the study and the continual updates relate back to their mission. For the operate forward folks, in other words, the prevention folks and the folks that are doing that, tie their activities at that location into that portion of it, if you will. And then the being ready part of it, if you want to model the military completely, then that mission would be the proactive side of creating standards, if you will, that match the resources, capabilities, and deployment models of the community. So in other words, you wouldn't build a 50-story building in the middle of a community that couldn't handle that infrastructure-wise or response-wise or prevention-wise. So I think it's simple and it's complicated, but I think one of the things that we do when we do that, and in the places where I was fortunate enough to play with you and Jack and others, and where we were successful, was put the firefighters, the people who are in charge of firefighting as their primary operating deal, into the system at that aspect. Put our fire marshal folks were in at the operate forward aspect, and then our other building planning city type folks were at the be ready stage, if you will. So that worked for us, and I think that's how you tie anything in life into it. It has to have some kind of relation to what the people's primary function is, and then the ancillary stuff they'll be interested in. But it's always hard when you try to assign a crew that's primary function is fire suppression mitigation to do the operate forward part of it, where they're trying to do the inspection code enforcement side of it. And I know it's difficult for some municipalities due to size, but maybe you can break it off by episode. In other words, when you go in for this particular part of that building tour, you're looking at this aspect. So I think there's ways to do it.
Well, I think everybody here, we've got a panel of some very progressive leaders in the fire service with tremendous amount of experience. Most fire academies, they come in and, and they beat on you right away about how tough you have to be, and it's about fighting fires and crawling hallways and all this stuff. We've talked, and Jack and Bobby, our very good friend Glenn Corbett, Professor Glenny, about understanding the history, where it all started and where it all came from. The class I do spun off of the class that Glenny I do. It's called Our History. This should be day one of the Fire Academy, explaining why we exist, what it actually is when it comes to being a firefighter. And again, as exciting as fighting a fire is, it's a bullet point in the job description. And Jack, one of the things, you've done this with Glenny is, like we talked about before, a lot of young firefighters don't realize the reason we do fire drills in schools, elementary schools, lots of school fires, but the catalyst for that, there's always a catalyst, right, was the Our Lady Angels Catholic School Fire, December 1st, 1958. 95 fatalities, 92 children, 3 nuns. The reason, the catalyst for the codes with place of public assembly was, let's back up, theaters was Iroquois Theater, the Brooklyn Theater, the Rhodes Opera House, Boyertown. The reason for the place of public assembly was Coconut Grove, 492 fatalities, or 472, I'm sorry. Beverly Hills Supper Club in Kentucky, then Happy Land in the Bronx. And, the reason why fire marshals are supposed, fire prevention people are supposed to go inspect the big top, the tent, when they're in your local park or church, is because of Hartford, Connecticut. I think when we miss out on this, maybe the history, Jack, how important is the history? You've been doing this a long time, to convey that message to that young firefighter that this stuff's important.
Yeah, well, history does play a role in the sense that we all learn from these tragedies and everything. But if we're going to really tame the fire environment, I think it's three phases. One is a lot more involvement on the state level and the national level with codes. We got to cut this stuff off before it gets out there. The other thing, what we're trying to do here is make the fire ground a lot safer. And the thing is that the fire service has representation out there, but not enough. Yes, we rely on the IGs, you rely on the State Fire Marshal Association, the National Volunteer Association, and maybe some state groups. But everyone in your community has a vote, and no one does it. So in order to do that, because the industry is changing every 3 years, we put residential sprinklers in residential buildings. They went state to state and took it out. So those are the things that we have to stay in front of. And that's one part of it. The other part is that no matter what, once you get the C of O and the two fire marshals that tell you, I inherit everything. They all walk away, the architects and engineers, I got it. It's in my ballpark. And that's where the third part comes in, suppression. Everybody says that we're overwhelmed with things, EMS, all this other stuff, but it's your fire ground. Don't you think if you knew where the floors were laid out and everything, that your searches would be better? How about taking guest-based knowledge out of size up? Size up a good thing. If I don't know anything about that building, I'm screwed. Really, think about that. You ever get that worry on your face in front of a building, guys? I did. All right. So the idea too is how to get that out there in a manner saying to the suppression units, this, just because it says the word pre-planning, it isn't prevention. It's for you. It's for your job and what you do on the fire ground. I'm working with Billy Shodas. He's teaching at the National Fire Academy, Command and Control. And Billy came up with QAPs, Quick Action Plans. So I set the things down with him when I'm working on building intelligence and said, Billy, I'm going to break this thing out for you, and you tell me if I'm on the right track. And we talked about time factors. Need information going out the door before the incident starts. Just basic information. The height of the building, length of the building, the type of occupancy, type of construction, fire protection systems, any safety and precaution in the building to me. Truss roof, oil furnace in the basement, things of that nature. That's what we call basic level. That's the 30 seconds you can get that. Everybody says, well, I can't look at the computer because I don't have an aide driving the chief's car. You do have an ear. Let your dispatcher tell you that stuff. And when I get big buildings, I put hard cards in the building because I've been to the event where I lost communications, lost computers and everything, and that's the backup. The thing with that is that once you do that and you get there, I just did a class out of the college today. Say, all right, you have this building information card. Here's your QAP. Look at the base, the back of the card. This is the floor layout, what I call the base of the building, the map. If I stand in front, stair A goes to the roof, to the left, B goes to the basement. This has a standpipe, that has a standpipe, this is the elevators. Then you look up at the verticals. You can do those things, the QAP 1s and 2s, in a 30 to 60 second slot. When you're there a long time, you look, they call it the front of the card, Bob knows this, there's 10 boxes, then I can digress it. Okay, but the idea is that the more we tell them, the more you know about the building, the better off you are. And if the industry is going to keep throwing stuff at us because the technology is advancing way before the codes, it's a scary thing. And in my area, I'm living on these, I told this to Bob, ESS, energy storage systems. They want to start putting Tesla car batteries in my buildings. Okay? So those are the things that the involvement is a complete circle. Everyone, the suppression, the codes, the prevention, has a game on this. And my good friend, my mentor, Jim Murtaugh said, it's the family of the fire service. It's prevention, it's education, it's training, it's suppression, it's codes, and it's the private sector. The private sector can help you out going into the building. And when you go into the building, if you're going to do an inspection, it is an inspection. You can't mix the recon up with the inspection. It don't work. And when you go in there as an inspector, when I did, all right, these are 10 things here. I would say, I wouldn't even tell them, this is what I want done first. And I put that on the top, right on the top. That's it. You get it done. If I come back, you do nothing. I'm a communicator. When I come back and you do nothing, I'm John Wayne. My attitude changes. I'm trying to work with you, and you got to help me out here. But then that becomes a little bit more restrictive. So you can't go in full force on it. But the idea is, how do you lay that out and communicate to people? Now let's take the state levels. Does anyone have safe certification for fire inspectors? Some do, some don't. In '85, when New Jersey went to a statewide code, we put in that every 3 years, you have to update your license. You have to take 6 classes, 5. I was a marshal. I was in charge of the prevention bureau. I had to take 6. But the idea is that what if you come out with new sprinkler systems, new suppression systems? You're staying ahead of the curve, and we brought that into New York, and that's working out well too with all the fire directors I have in the high rises. So the idea here is it's a never-ending job. I feel for all the construction down there, but it's a good time to start. You're seeing it, like you said, it's going up from the foundation, and you see your scary points. And when you put the skin on the outside, you can't read that building anymore.
Well, and we were able to, and Terry, I'll point this to you and then over to John. Terry, before you were assistant chief there, you were, the bomb and arson chief, and, like Mark does for now, Chief Richards, the investigations. And Frisco was one of the catalysts with this in the way of getting this taken care of. We started having all the problems in the east end of town. Remember with the yellow coated flexible gas line with the lightning strikes and the pinholes, right? And I mean, remember how many times if we had a concealed space fire, we knew. And again, what Jack's one of the things I picked out what you said too was getting the information from the line back up to the people that can make the difference for you. How many times did we deal with that, Terry? And then I'll throw it to John, because they were some of the leaders in addressing that whole, we're burning stuff down because of that pipe they were putting in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I, in my opinion, Chief, that was something that I felt changed building code wise. I felt like that changed fairly rapidly. Now, it might have been the fact that, like every third house was burning down every time lightning struck. And of course, I bought a house about 2 years ago and was loading stuff in the attic, and guess what I got? But yeah, I mean, when that came out, you saw it, and it was pitched to, anyone who looked at it and thought, oh, well, that makes sense. It's easy to install. You can move it, you can add and it's almost to the level that the homeowner could do it. That's the way they kind of marketed it and pitched it. And then of course the consistent and constant fire problems with it. And that really, in my opinion, and John certainly probably knows more on that end, but when the problems and the multitude of problems occurred from that product, that was pretty quick and sweeping how fast that came and went.
Well, and John, you guys had a hand in that. I know that in Frisco, because you were seeing it as well. I would refer people. We had a problem. I was saying, what, Frisco's leading a charge on this to address this, because you were seeing a lot of fires as well. And this was something that, again, in the absence of a good investigation, that comes back to go back to the people that are planning and building and doing anything for us and have a hand in it ahead of time. I think, and I know for us, we were able to at least identify it and slow some of that down a little bit.
Yeah, we started getting these fires. When you have a booming town, you get these rapid constructions of homes. And I'll give you an example how quick the homes are building here. We've been averaging 200 single-family homes a month under construction for the last 3 years. And then during the 2 years of the recession, each year we still built 1,000 homes those 2 years of the recession. So when you're going into a large amount of construction, and then the whole issue started with the CSST stands for corrugated stainless steel tubing, this yellow gas piping you're talking about. So we started seeing fires related to that, and there was some tests done. The city had paid for some testing done that we still every once in a while get public information requests for. But the reality was we started seeing a problem in some codes. Code analysis had to be reevaluated, and so we have amendments to the code that talk about that. But I think the one thing everybody has to remember is this gas line problem has not gone away, and it won't go away because you have homes that are built with it. And so, like, for example, when we get lightning storms, we'll beef up staffing within our department. And I just see the emails and hear the conversations. I don't get involved in that too much, other than obviously we have to have people out to investigate. But the big part of the whole CSST conversation is Lubbock had the fatality, which instigated the Lubbock Fire Department, and the Lubbock Fire Marshal's office has really jumped out there since that death. And that death was from my understanding, was a self-response type situation.
Yeah. Chief, I'm sorry. Have you come up with a solution for that now? Did they have to put in lightning rods or anything in the building, or even in a private house?
No, sir. We didn't go that route. We have the research we've done in the last 6 years shows that they haven't installed it for quite a while.
Okay.
And so we'll go out and spot check. And this goes back to that relationships that you have with other city departments. You got to have that relationship with your building official's office. Our building official used to be a firefighter here, so he understands things that we can talk about that maybe other cities don't have the luxury.
Yeah.
But the reality of the whole thing is we have shut-off valves that are required that were installed after we started seeing these problems. But I can tell you in the last 6 to 7 years, we haven't had anybody install it. I'm not sure why the reasoning is behind it. But if we did get one, they would be talking to us and letting us know, hey, we're starting to see that.
And you bring out a good point. You have a problem. The neighbors have a problem, in the community towns and everything else. And now that goes to another step. That gets up to the state for the codes. All right. And they look at that. And that goes to the national level. So now that little thing that started in the community has 3 legs. And the legs are how do we prevent that going across the country too, and make those changes to that. So those are key things there and I'll say this to everybody, I'm looking for better NIFA reports too.
Well, that's something that the state fire marshal in Texas has gotten involved with, because Chief Keneally sent out an email where they asked departments to go back, because one of the challenges I get is I'll get public information requests for, hey, how many CSST fires you have. Now, for everybody who's done infers, or in Texas for a while it was called texfers, but it's the same stuff. That's not easy data to get. And just like you talked about, data is the power of change in relation to codes. And so, yeah, that's a challenge for us to track that information down. But I will tell you on a subject you talked about earlier that I think, how do you get enthusiasm to the frontline guys? I try to celebrate successes when we've seen prevention work. For example, if you do see these problems with gas lines, you can educate your operations personnel. And obviously our guys do a fantastic job. When they get a lightning strike, that's one of the first things they pay attention to. But I'll give you an example of where our single family residents, we had a fire last summer. It was around 6,800 square foot house. Guy was lacquering, and he'd been doing it 2 or 3 hours with no ventilation, and he had a static charge, activate a sprinkler head and make a save. And I had a frontline firefighter say, gosh, Chief, I'm so glad we had that, because this would have been one heck of a house fire to control had we not had that success. So when you hear officers saying that, if you can celebrate those victories in the battles that you fight to get things in these buildings, you can see successes and work through things like problems in buildings, educate your operations personnel.
Yeah.
We always try to do it even though we're busy, and I can't tell you there's always room for improvement, but I can tell you our guys are very familiar with the CSST challenge in relation to, hey, when they make a tactical approach to that house, they're looking at those types of things. So
here's an example of these being installed in what I call a two-pick building. Glenn Corbett calls them two-pick buildings. We have a pedestal building with a fire resistant rating for the garages. They took all these gas lines, these yellow gas lines that you talked about, and guess where they ran them through the garage on the ceiling? And they were in there several times, and no one picked it up. Right over the engine of the car. if we're having problems with these things, you gotta put it over an ignition source. At least run them somewhere else. Run it down the middle where the car is not going to be parked and idled and everything. So the idea here is that this was a new, what I call new eyes going in. No one picked that up. And when you go out with your companies and you're doing what I call building recon, everyone has a new set of eyes. I just did a neighboring town. They did the hospital. I went for the 4th tour. I went in there. It was the 4th tour that came out and said, I never noticed that door that's 15 feet up. And it's just the door. And it's a fixed ladder. I said, where does it come from on the other side? On the other side is the ground level. So I said to them, you want to post the door on the outside? You know, avoid space here, fixed ladder, there's no floor. So those are the little things that you pick up. And it's the eyes of the firefighters who go in these things that you want to, that gets them excited. I really played that up as soon as that individual pointed that out. I said, I'm here 4 times. I didn't pick that up. That individual did. So that's where that enthusiasm gets started with the suppression units.
Well, and I want to throw something out to the group. First of all, remind some of our viewers, I appreciate the messages in Messenger and on Facebook. We said at the beginning of the show, please use hashtag FETalk. And on Twitter, we could jump to your questions a little more. And I got this one, and we just talked about celebrating the successes. We've said before, for years we've said it, well, we have a way of measuring dollar loss, due to fire every year, which we can get going on how much that is. I mean, how many people, so on and so forth. But anyway, one of the questions was, we talked about technology and how important that is and being proactive. One of the questions was, how do you measure the effectiveness of your fire prevention program? How do you measure the effectiveness? Can you measure the effectiveness? And kind of goes back to what you said, John, about celebrating our successes. So many times guys they respond, they come back and don't even realize that what we had in place prevented something really bad from happening, or how we, what I'm saying? Just like Jack, you say, knowing what's in the building and doing your recon. Terry mentioned it before. I'll throw this out there. How do you evaluate the effectiveness of a fire prevention program? Can you? I'll throw it out to anybody. Bobby, anybody?
Well, I'll tell you, it's always a challenge to do that. But I think it goes back down to, you see some people say building saves, you see some things change, but I think you have to look at the overall fire prevention perspective in the city. You have to go back and say, okay, how many buildings out of the commercial building fires that we had, how many of them were successful? How many things do we need to change in the code to reduce the fire loss history in the city? How do you measure that? Sometimes you can't. You'll never be able to predict the entire prevention aspect of how many education programs in Safety Town in Frisco teach some kid or a child and had success. We won't know all those things, but we can quantitatively go back and look at, okay, how much property damage were we successful with sprinklers versus not? And where do we see trends in our data that we need to go back and successfully change the codes? And in Texas, we have the ability to adopt our own fire code. I'm literally in the process of getting the 2015 ready to go to council. Literally as we speak, it'll be going to legal this afternoon. But the reality of the whole thing is we have to be able to look at it from a whole perspective, the engineering, education, enforcement perspective of prevention, and look at the entire picture of the community to measure some of that data. And I think there's other ways out there that you can look at. But again, it's just like anything else. Either you meet minimum standards or you don't. So we all know there's thresholds in the codes that we think are successful. Other communities may not, and they change it. And so to me, you got to look at the whole picture. You can't look at the microcosm. How many fire investigations do you investigate? And I'll tell you, one of the challenges we've had here with so much construction, we get these fires where people use the linseed rags to do the wood staining, and then they throw them in a construction barrel. And it just amazes me how many we've gotten each year through just some basic thing, getting that data, going back and educating people And reducing those losses, you can quantify some of it. You just have to look at the whole picture, in my opinion.
Great point, Bobby.
Historically, we've always looked at declining property loss numerically, and then we've also measured the civilian death rate, which is always interesting. And I think that there's value to doing that. And I think that, the problem becomes is the attribution. In other words, what do you attribute it to? And that's where, as the chief was just so eloquently opining on, that's where it gets kind of wicked. In other words, say you have a dropping civilian death rate, is that attributed to a greater awareness among the civilian population, or closer adherence to code, or some program that was initiated? So the attribution part of it is always difficult. They say, the absence of evidence isn't the evidence of absence. So, it's the old black swan theory. And I also enjoy the folks that always say that the one place you don't want to be is in a building that has a sign that says no accidents in 217 days. So
until today.
So that's a complicated question.
Yeah,
I think
it
it's
is.
one of the things that we should do, I think, when we construct a program or put together an enforcement program, is that you build in benchmarks there that you try to hit, and then over time you'll be able to get a handle on whether or not the program was effective. When it results in actions, particularly behaviors, like right now we're working on the close the door program, and it was funny. I was showing that video to some folks the other day, and they said, "Yeah, that'd be great. My house didn't come with doors." It's new open floor plan stuff. They said there's like 2 doors in their whole house. I said, okay, keep them closed. They said, yes, the front and the back. So, it's going to be interesting to see when you put together a program. I think that's when you put together how you're going to measure it. But, people will quote, the great British statesman Benjamin Disraeli with "There's lies, damn lies, and statistics." You could set up any set of barometers to give you the measurements that you want, and I'm not saying people do that, but arguably, if we're looking for a conclusion or we're looking for an objective, it's hard not to have those internal biases push us in one way or another. But the ultimate goal of the fire service really is to always, respond to and be proactive against the forces of fire, and as best we can. And I think we're doing a pretty good job. And I think with the codes, it's going to become more and more interesting. That we talked about the CST, the corrugated steel tubing, and our friends in the aviation industry have known for years when there's a lightning strike on an aircraft, you don't see a big gash in the plane. You see tiny, tiny little pinprick holes throughout the aircraft frame. And
I'm flying next week. Thanks, Bobby. So I guess
so you got that going for you.
we're looking out the window for that.
There'll be a sign that says they hadn't crashed in 352 days.
So but I think that clearly I like the programs that get us out more. That there's nothing I think more effective than getting folks excited about learning. And I think that the construction industry today is so remarkable that when you get on one of their sites, they're more than willing to show you some of the new things they're using. Jack was talking about the toothpick towers that are going up. It's the new, I call it the new taxpayer, because they have although the taxpayer actually supported the units above, which is where the term taxpayer came from. The first floor paid the taxes for the folks living above. But the new model for folks in my generation, the boomers that are retiring, and for some of the younger people, is to have that mercantile first floor, which is that non-combustible, and then above it is all wood. And Dugan and I did a little piece on it for Fire Engineering. Dugan wrote it up, where we were looking at one of those 8 stories above that first concrete floor. And there was a parking garage and a mercantile, and then 8 stories of all wood, which is fascinating. And you wonder how that's going to happen. They're doing wood high rises now. They've built one in, I think it was Toronto or somewhere in Ontario, Canada. And they got one planned for New York City. So it's an interesting time to be involved, and a good time to be involved. And I think that the passive side of it, as I look at the fire prevention problem for my money, I always like to have a good, strong passive dose backed up by an active system, because the active systems can always be prone to, catastrophic events or just man-made events. Someone flipping a switch or turning off a main and preventing the water to flow. Whereas that, having a drywall system or a non-combustible barrier or a fire-rated door, those things, they'll give you what they're rated to give you, and I like that. So I think measurements need to be built into the program beforehand, and then see how well you reach those measurements. It's hard after the fact.
I like them too, Bob, and you hit on a good one there. Active and passive, and when we have to watch out what we're trading off too. They say just because you put sprinklers in, I can make the distance longer, I can reduce down the fire protection ratings and everything else. Time out here. What I say before, we all inherit these buildings. You mean to tell me no one's going to come in here and do renovations? No one's going to come in here and take out a sprinkler system on the floor? That's where the problem comes, because I'm still trying to keep a business going, say 6 stories, and they're just gutting the 4th floor. There's no sprinklers, no nothing.
Well, that's an interesting thing, and I when I go to council meetings, I'm never there that they're not ruling on variances. Mm-hmm. And that always blows me away, because when it comes to safety, the turn radiuses and the ability to get access to all parts of a building, and they're set there by code, and there's been a substantial amount of research done to produce that code. But everybody wants a way around it, and we seem to, you mentioned the ugly word that politics will come into play in everything that we do in a municipal government, and that's what it comes down to. And those variances, when it comes to fire codes and access to buildings and things like that, and that those are the things that make me lay awake at night, because on this hand, we could really use some help on this because we want to make this work, and then you have this side, and I'm always the person that's just kind of hard stance and go, well, no, I want to go with what code says, because that's the research that's been done. What you're asking for hasn't been researched. You're just asking for something, and we make the decision whether you can or you can't do it. But that's a decision someone's got to live with.
Yeah, and Chief, you bring up a good point. There's prescriptive codes and performance-based codes. Any of you down there dealing with performance-based?
Yeah, I'm fortunate that I'm a fire protection engineer, so they're not going to blow too much smoke up my rear. But the reality is, yes, we run into that a lot. And when we did the STAR, for example, it has a smoke control system. They wanted to just say, there was some discussion about, well, we just don't have to put sprinklers in. I said, well, there's a little more to it than that. Mm-hmm. And so the reality of the whole thing is yes, we do see that. And I'll give you an example. When you go out and get an economic type environment where there is a tremendous amount of building construction and growth, and people want these things, we have a place where you can fly in a simulated parachute environment, and where they have this big tube that has 20,000 CMU or CFM fans. And so you try to build something like that per prescriptive code, it's a nightmare. I mean, we're not putting sprinklers in a wind tunnel, and we can't put strobes through a big glass thing. So how do we work through it? There's prescriptive reasons things are put in the code to be successful. If you fly through Terminal D at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, before I was with Frisco, that was a prescriptive-based, performance-based design for that terminal. It's a very complicated structure, and the fire service was well involved at the airport from the beginning to the end when I was working there, going through that. So when you build a unique structure that's an eye-popping thing for your community, you got to have a balance and sensitivity. And I can proudly say that our city management has bent over backwards to make sure that we don't build stuff that's not fire safe for the citizens, for the visitors, for the firefighters, and for staff. But yes, we see more and more prescriptive codes. But I will tell you, you talk about the concrete platform and 4 stories and 5-story stick, we're getting that up so much because the days of garden style apartments are gone. You've got politically driven entities that have certain expectations of the community, and that's what they want. And so from a fire hazard perspective, it's still, I totally agree with you, with everybody talking about active and passive. You have to have both to be effective. I think the challenge in the fire service has been for many years, we sometimes trade too much to get sprinklers. And we have got, I think we're getting a better grasp of it, but I think we have to work through those challenges. And I will tell you that that's a popular thing in Texas. I can go to other parts of the state and see very similar challenging building construction features that we're seeing as well. And the density of those is another issue that talks about planning and population projections. But the reality is the real estate's getting really expensive in Frisco, and other cities are the same way. And so they want to do more for less. And it's, hey, what can I not get away with, but what would you be willing to live with? And so the things that y'all have talked about are things that seem like hourly conversations that I can predict. By the time I leave this conversation today, I'll have 2 calls asking those questions.
Yeah. And Bob, you brought up the wooden high rises. Everything I've seen about them, they're pretty detached from other buildings. In the middle of Manhattan, all right? I have 3 feet maybe between buildings, or they butt up against one another. My concern is an outside fire overriding the whole building.
Well, and I mean, Bobby, we talked about that. We saw overseas what happened with the outside fire and what we're putting on the outside and just everything. Well, one of the things I'll throw out there to you guys is, at what point, and everyone else has hit on the lack of support sometimes we get from the state or whatever. I know what we went through here trying to get residential sprinkler stuff passed in Texas, which to me should be a no-brainer, but it wasn't, because we know who's involved with all those different things. The money, and I'm always, and Bobby, you've got a better handle on this than I ever will, but, law enforcement, God bless them. They know how to market their mission. They go out and scare people with crime, and they get a lot of money. They know how to market their mission, and plus it's the nature of the beast. But I just think we do a poor job selling ourselves on the support we need. It's always like, well, we're the insurance policy if they get a fire. We don't do a good enough job going out pushing for the funding. I think, what I'm saying? I just think there's so much more to what we need to do to be able to do better things. We're talking technology, all the different stuff that's out there. Look at thermal imagers now. Years ago, you had to spend all that money to get one mounted to your helmet. And now, we're making them in masks. We're finding how many years later, Bobby, the challenge isn't getting the funding or the support from the government itself is a huge challenge.
Well, hell of a question to ask the libertarian. Not where I would go. The interesting thing about it, and Herbert Spencer was this brilliant English philosopher many years ago. He said that the goal of education is not knowledge, it's action. So I would say, rather than marketing, what we've done a terrible job at is educating the public about sprinkler systems. Quite frankly, we've done an abysmal job of educating the fire service about sprinklers. Everybody wants to force other people to have them, which is all well and good. And God bless you for wanting to make the other people do stuff that you yourselves haven't done. So, good for you. And I don't think we want to go that way. I think we'd gain far more acceptance if we told people the tremendous benefits they could have, and how much the people who've had them have saved, and how blessed they are by the fact that they had them, and make them want to be part of that social circle, rather than saying, oh, if we had more money from the government, we could bribe the right politician to force people to do this. And I think that what will happen then is that folks will turn them off or resist them or find ways to do without them. Rather, I would say we need to find better ways to educate people about how fantastic they are and how life-saving they are, and how critical they can be. To John, basically, like the cops, people always confuse prevention with mitigation and response. And basically, we just drew the chalk outline around the fire, like the cops do around the body. and so it's, I would much rather come and help folks, turn off a sprinkler system and get the shop vac out and help them, clean up a little water damage on a small event than, try to find a Red Cross shelter for them when they've lost everything to a catastrophic fire. But, so I think we've kind of always, we've been conditioned over the last 40 years of thoughtlessness and social engineering and collectivism that, we should get everybody to do something by law and mandate, and good for you if you feel that way. I'm more of a libertarian. I'd rather educate people and have them want it and clamor for it and desire it and demand it. And I think that, then we'd see better systems. We'd see them put in faster. We'd see because there'd be more people doing it, they'd be more affordable. And I hope we go in that direction versus the totalitarian tyrant system, which seems to be so dang popular these days. Sorry.
No, it's a great point, Terry.
Now, I was going to say it's almost like John had mentioned earlier, is to celebrate a success. But the business that burns down on Main Street that causes a news cycle run, it causes the water cooler talk at the city hall, or all those sort of things. But that exact same incipient fire that starts, the sprinkler keeps it in check or extinguishes it. We go out because the smoke alarms go off. We make entry, go in there. We basically clean it up, but we're done. When in reality, we should be high-fiving and making, we should have a ribbon cutting or a balloon or something.
Channel 5 doesn't show up for that story.
Right. That's exactly right. And so if I could ever figure out a way to do it, my dream FDIC class is to go over the fact that we have a hard time measuring what never happens. And that's where I think that's what prevention is. So when the World Trade Center, when the attack on New York City took place, there was something tactile that people could latch onto, and they could say, wow, it was, they could visually understand it. They could feel it. They had a sense of the horror of it all. It wasn't a couple of years later, I think it was, the FBI ran a sting on a guy in Dallas, and they sold him a fake bomb and a fake car bomb. They helped him park it in the parking garage of a downtown building. They drove him in a decoy car away, and he's mashing. And then we moved on to something else. But think of the enormity of what that guy wanted to do. But it didn't happen. Therefore, it wasn't really that big of a deal.
It's a great point. Well, hey, we could always go a few minutes beyond our deadline here. Shannon and Bob, you're very good with that. And Terry, the segue was perfect into, how we always finish out here. And I'll start. We'll start with John, do Jack, Bobby, and that. As we close out the program, and an hour flies by. We said this; it always flies by, and great information. Back to the title that we kind of pushed out there: pushing fire prevention to the front lines. Let's do a little summary here, John. We'll start with you. Let's get the guys, no pun intended, let's get them fired up. Let's get them pumped up about the fact that fire prevention is important. And what advice do you give? You've got that chance to sit down with a new company officer, and then you're going to walk into the Proby class or whatever. Tell me about that company officer. What are you going to say to him or her about the importance of fire prevention?
I'm going to tell them it can make or break your situation of the safety with your crew at any type of incident, and you're going to go back and educate them and show them things of why you have these things. Why do I have passive protection? Why do I have active protection? What are my pitfalls of one or the other? How do I use these tools to save the firefighter's life? Do I make an attack out of my stairwell if I know the door is closed? I would sit down and educate them as to how this all entwines. Why do we build buildings the way we do? How do we put these features into place? How do I take advantage of these features? How do I in turn provide the best level of service to our citizen or our visitor or ourselves in any kind of structure? And I just tell them it's a daily, constant updating, knowing your area, being familiar with things, call the right people that you need to know to be successful in what you're doing. If you don't know, call your fire marshal's office. They in turn can get you in the right steps. If you have a success, show the success of why it worked. And this is why we have features. A lot of times our investigators will take the time to say, here, or if it's me out there, here's how this worked. This is why you have a 1 hour separation between your garage and your house. In your garage door, that's why the fire stayed in the garage from the car fire. Showing the small things that can make it successful for them, that in turn makes them be able to successfully provide good extinguishment, minimal loss damage, and help your citizen and hopefully keep their life safe when they're making the attack. I think that's huge.
Awesome. Great point, buddy. Jack, same thing. Jack, you've been a mentor to so many people in your career. Walk us into the Proby class, FDNY Anywhere. You got a chance to meet right before they graduate. What message do you give to the, John, we had him sit with that new company officer and tell him or her, what do you say to the probationary firefighter right from the get-go about all this?
Well, they're going into basically into the suppression units. I'm going to tell them that there are three key things there: codes and prevention. All the three of them have to go together. You're going to learn from each one of those. When you go out there, you learn your tactics, you make modifications and everything. But some of those tactics are based around what John said. If I know where my fire prevention walls, my fire resistant walls are and everything, I can take better tactics on that. So all these things come into play as one. It's unity of one. The other thing too is that you have all this stuff out there. You have to be the new eyes for everybody. Don't be afraid to speak up. Hey, say to the first lieutenant or the captain, I didn't realize that was there. What do I do in that case? You have to start a conversation in the building. I tell everybody, and I'm not crazy, all buildings talk to you. They're going to tell you how it's going to react. I don't care what type of construction it is. They're going to tell you how it's going to react in a fire. They're going to react in all hazards and all this other stuff. So the more you know about that, the better it is. And one thing I'll say, and I'll end on this, is the sharing of data amongst ourselves as agencies. Why can't I grab building department data? Why can't I grab zoning data? And all that stuff into my network of things, my silos of information. I don't have to go out and reinvent everything here in that aspect. And the other thing too is look at smart firefighting that the NFPA is a lot better. That's starting to take off. So the idea is that the new people coming up there, they're a lot more in tune to me trying to figure out where to plug in my headset for the show. All right, they're in tune to everything. And the whole idea is that I like that stuff, but let's work, make those tools work for us. We can share this data and get it done. And the idea is here, think of what I just said. Think in QAPs, quick action plans, basic, intermediate, and comprehensive. It will work for you.
Awesome. Bobby, I'm going to steal one of your phrases you use in classes. We work within this gigantic echo chamber. Well, you're at the top. I mean, with what you do with the magazine, with the magazines, with the show, your involvement over 40 years in the fire service like Murph. But what do you say to the fire service, Bobby, to have them wrap their arms around the whole fire prevention, public education thing a little bit better? What do you say from your podium, buddy?
Well, I would just say, frame your words as to how you want people to react. We think in pictures. So whenever we say something like, the troops don't like to do something, well, you're right, because that's what you think. That's your picture. So I always enjoyed doing pre-fire plans, inspection tours, where we could, do a pre-fire plan along with it, because it tied into the response. Again, I always go to look at the three elements of how we do it. The firefighting, forward, and then being ready. So put the right group in with the right part of that activity. If I could just close out with one thing, I'd like to say, hey, hope to see you all in 68 days in Indianapolis. We're going to be doing a little show there called FDIC. The iWomen registration is open for those of you that just want to go to the iWomen conference. It's a wonderful opportunity to see what FDIC is like. If you're not convinced you want to go to the big show yet, you get a flavor for it. It's going to be conference within a conference, and that's on the website. It's a great deal. We've got some wonderful keynoters. We've got Angie Hughes, we've got Mike McAvoy, and we've got Denise Smith all presenting. So going to be a really neat deal going on there. We got a Jack won Lifetime Achievement Award a few years ago. We got a guy, I can't think of the guy's name. He's a little known character, rather obscure Lifetime Achievement Award winner this year. Golly, what was his name?
Tom?
Oh, no. Doesn't Dan.
It begins with an R.
I'll think of it.
It begins with an R, Bob.
Yeah, I'll think of it. But Ricky Lasky will be receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award. We only give it to really, really old people. So, Ricky will be dying in a few days after we give it. So please, just
I'm going to haunt you. I'm going to come back and haunt
you. Jack won it, and that was Jack.
I'm still here. Leave me alone.
I'm going to come back and haunt you.
Jack won 35 years ago. He's still here.
Bobby.
So, but I will say the best thought I had of the entire conversation was when the chief was talking about the parachute ride, and I'm thinking, there's a PPV attack aficionado's dream come true. Turn the building itself into its own attack machine. It'd be great. You know what they say? Some people go to windblown fires, and other people make them.
Oh God! Hey, well, great show, John. Thank you for joining us. Our fire marshal for Frisco, Texas. Very, very, if you have a chance, extremely proactive fire department. You got a great boss. You got a great chief there. Great guys. I know a lot of them. The safety town, I know people from Europe come to see that thing. It's that incredible. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, information, question or whatever, email the best for you. How would they get a hold of you, John?
My email address is jgillette, GILLETTE @friscofire.com. Or if you go to our website at friscofire.com, you can go under contacts and you'll see my ugly face and you'll be able to find me.
Well, thank you, brother. Thanks for being a guest. We're going to hang on before we go off. Jack, you've been a mentor for so many, including me, for all these years. I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for me in my career and for so many. If somebody want to get a hold of you, best email, buddy.
All right. FM Fire Marshal, FM Jack 1948 @gmail.
Very good, very good. And Bobby, I know I always ask you, and you always say it's in the front of the magazine.
Google body waxing.
Oh, good God, I love him to death. Terry, your email one more time, buddy.
Yeah, first initial, last name, T. McGrath, McGrath @cityoflewisville.com.
Awesome. And folks, you can get a hold of me at prideownership.com or holler at me here in Trophy Club, Texas. A great fire department with great people as well. We can't thank you enough for joining us today. Fire off some questions. Reach out to our guests if you have a chance. Our good friend, Lieutenant Ray McCormick, uses the phrase, keep fire in your life. Some people confuse that. Ray's always pushing. It's about passion. It's about loving what you do. One more area we need to love a little bit more what we do in the fire service is that when it comes to preventing fires in the first place. So keep that fire out of your life. Keep the other passion in. Ray's doing a great job of getting guys pumped up about the job. But thank you so much. FDIC again. There's something for everybody there. There's every kind of class you could think of. I don't care what your role is, volunteer career. Some people think, well, no, there's something for whether you're new, really old, like Bobby, whatever, it doesn't matter. There's something there for everybody. You'll walk away from that place I love first timers because they're just absolutely amazing. I've said for years it's Disney World, except instead of mouse ears, they wear helmets. It's an incredible show. So I'd like to thank our guests. We're going to hang in there for a second. You can catch us with our Humpday Hangouts pretty much every Wednesday with some great guests. Don't forget the radio shows. Visit the website often, fireengineer.com. There's a ton of things going on there, FDIC.com, and all our other magazines. Great people, great information that's out there for you. And we never end any of our shows without reminding you to keep the men and women in armed forces in your thoughts and prayers, as well as those in law enforcement. They need us more than ever. God bless you. Thank you, and be safe all.